The Adam Carolla Show presents Kelsey Grammer's birthday cocktail party for February 21st. Let's see who's invited. The German-born Russian Tsar and husband of Catherine the Great, Peter III. Here's the President of Mexico, who dominated Mexican history in the first half of the 19th century, and also the namesake of all that wind, Santa Anna. Here's the Zimbabwean revolutionary, Robert Mugabe. Let's welcome singer, songwriter, and civil rights activist, Nina Simone. Legendary record producer David Geffen is here. Alan Rickman just joined the party. Actress Christine Ebersole is here. Astronaut and Senator Scott Kelly just walked in. Jordan Peele is here. And now it's a party, because Jennifer Love Hewitt just walked in. Kelsey Grammer is on the Adam Carolla Show.
Wow. Pretty interesting birthday cocktail party for Kelsey Grammer. The movie Wish You Were Here, which I watched, is out as we speak. Julia Stiles makes her directorial debut, and it's a very sweet, moving, touching, and oftentimes funny, poignant. Nice film. By the way, when I say little film, I don't mean that in a condescending way. It's not a big film, but it's a very intimate film, and it's nice. And Kelsey plays the dad.
There you go. I'm the dad.
It is crazy, right? When you're the dad.
I mean, Julia called me, and we'd done a movie together about 5 years ago called The God Committee, which was not a very easy film to watch, actually, because it was kind of sad, but she was lovely in it. And she said, I'm going to do this movie, and will you appear as the dad? And then I said, sure, I'll do it with a sight unseen. I mean, just because of, her own credential, and she's a great gal. So I said, yeah, why not? And
it's nice. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice when you work with people you like. At a certain point, you get old enough where someone goes, oh, this is a good job, and you go, I know, but I can't stand that person, and life's too short. I just don't want to deal with it.
I would never do that.
You would think that.
Yeah.
How you're from LA? You've been out here for a million years. I'm still displaced. I've not been able to return to Malibu.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah, but my place miraculously made it when almost nothing around it did. How about you? How did you fare during these fires?
Okay. Yeah, I'm sitting in my home right now. We live in Holmby Hills, which was never really quite threatened. It's really in the heart of kind of the semi-concrete jungle. So it's there's some trees around, but it doesn't have the same kind of access to as Gavin Newsom would say, the urban wildlife interface.
Yeah.
So,
do you find it interesting that things, pardon the pun, but the wind seems to blow a different direction now that Trump got in, and people are sort of coming out from out of their shells a little and kind of going, you know what, I don't think whatever we were doing before was effective. And, and also in Hollywood, it was very taboo. I was talking to someone yesterday, and I said, when someone is very progressive, they walk onto the set or into work and announce it from the mountaintops and start shouting it at everyone. I said, when I go onto a set, I have the camera guys quietly walk up to me and go, I saw you on Gutfeld, and I agree with what you're saying, but don't say anything. It's a very Morano, quiet, don't let anyone know. I feel like people are kind of coming out of the closet now. Do you have that
I think
vibe?
so. I think there's an ease about it. There's an understanding that, maybe a few conservative principles might help in our life here. And certainly paying attention to the idea that you're supposed to protect the community, things like that, are really important, rather than the other community, the one that isn't necessarily from here.
Yes, I know.
As I wanted to say to Bruce a while back was, some of us, we were also born in the USA.
Yeah, the boss.
Yeah.
So, Kelsey, you haven't really had a period where you didn't work in your adult career, which you're going to maybe dismiss as luck, but I don't think it has anything to do with luck, and you don't think it has anything to do with luck either. You're just being modest, but I just mean a feeling of, I have it in my career too. It's like a feeling of having to throw track out in front of you constantly, just because you're just powering down. The train is moving ahead and you got to keep throwing track out there, right?
Yeah, I just want to keep working. I mean, it's my life. It's my job. I also have a young family, and I'm dad. I need to make a living.
I agree with you, but I wonder why my dad didn't feel that way. Like, and I don't know how your dad thought, but I do have that same thing where, like, look, people depend on me, and I can't hang out. I got to show up. I got to earn. There's people that depend on me. My dad didn't have an ounce of that, and I don't know why. It didn't bother him. But what was your dad like?
Well, I didn't know my dad very well.
Oh, that's right.
So it's one of those things. But,
all right, what was my dad like?
Well, surely he was probably one of the driving forces in your life, because you ended up being a very funny guy who is always working, and maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know.
I think it was a lot of nature and not a lot of nurture.
Yeah,
but your dad, I'm sorry for not remembering all the nuts and bolts.
It's okay. It's all right.
But you grew up in a kind of broken environment, right?
Yes, I certainly did. Yeah. And my dad, it's interesting, it's like, I don't mean to steer us back to politics, but certain stances like Second Amendment rights and stuff like that. Somebody came up to me once after some shooting, and I thought to myself, yes, I get this, and a reporter, and he said, so, clearly we just got to outlaw them all the time. And I said, well, it's funny. My dad was gunned down. And I wish, not that I would advocate that he would be a good shot or anything, but I just wish maybe he'd had a gun too.
Right. And
that was
potentially protect himself.
Potentially have not died that day. Yeah. So.
That was in the Virgin Islands?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Where was it?
Long time ago.
Yeah.
68.
Yeah. Is that something that's just with you somewhere? Always?
Yeah, it's in there. Yes, I mean, I think about it sometimes, and the fact that I didn't know him really is it's not a blessing or a curse. It's just sort of there it is. That's my dad, and I never really said the word dad out loud until I became a dad, which is kind of an interesting thing. But I did meet him once when I was 14, and then he died about a couple months later. So that was it.
Man.
Oh no, I was 12. Actually, when I met him,
it's so crazy that everyone has a story, and there's oftentimes a lot of tragedy woven in. But it is funny when others are very dismissive about everyone else's story, and they drill down in great detail on their own. And then also, I think you and I are of the same head, which is I had a successful, very attractive blonde who went to UCLA try to lecture me on my white privilege, like my white male privilege at a party not that long ago. And I was just like, you have no idea. You have no idea. And by the way, you have a D cup, blonde hair. That's a lot of privilege in this town. And
something's working for you.
You went to UCLA, so you're way ahead of me in my privilege.
Yeah.
But it's always assumed. And I think in a weird way, your characters have sort of embodied sort of white privilege. You know what I mean? The erudite, the speech, the look. I mean, it's mannerisms. I know you've leaned into it, much like Jim Backus or something invented it. You know what I mean?
Thurston Howell.
Not since, if there was a lineage of sort of rich white guys, it would be Jim Backus up until 1974, and then Kelsey Grammer would take over as the rich white guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the career sort of doesn't jive exactly with the history, but it's okay. Well, I prefer to play any number of different things if I can, and but I believe in erudition. I mean, I think that speaking well is something that's necessary for a human being to communicate well with other human beings. And I value language. I mean, that's my life. It's important to me. It's what makes us laugh. Good language makes us, kicks us. It's just fantastic. So that's where I live. Yeah, that's all my privilege, rolling right up into a ball of erudition and eloquence.
Well, grammar, obviously.
Yeah, I was stuck with that.
The pressure's on. But
Yeah,
I agree with you as I hear more and more politicians sounding like athletes, from the 70s and the 80s. I think, what happened to this? And then I realize, they're doing a folksy kind of connect with the people. And I'm like, I get what they're doing, but it's like, I like Fetterman, but put on a suit. You're showing up to the Capitol. You know what I mean?
I've grown to appreciate him a lot more because he seems to be the only honest Democrat in the office right now.
Right.
But I am really impressed with him, except, I wish, put on a tie. Not that I'm the jerk about it, but I remember years ago, there was a fellow that used to be the news guy on the Today Show. And somebody said, you always wear, a very, very conservative outfit, blah, 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 blah. And he said, yes, well, because if I wear a loud tie, for instance, on the air today, somebody might have died and that might hurt their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
That's he was very respectful of his audience. He always thought, I'm going to always present an image of a person who takes himself seriously and takes the audience seriously, because he was reading the news. Things that happened that day that might be actually crushing for someone. And that I thought was very responsible.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm also into the kind of broken windows approach to society, not just crime, which is, schools where they have a dress code and a uniform have 40% less fights. You know what I mean? And when you play classical music, you have less altercations than when you play rock music, and so on and so forth. And people, I think, well, maybe that makes you some uptight person that says video games make people violent. And I'm like, no, but the fact that people are flying commercially in slippers and sweatpants and a wife beater, and the instances of unruly passengers is up 172% versus guys wearing monogram smoking jackets and ascots. I do believe there's a correlation and a connection.
I do too. Yeah. It just seems pretty obvious on the face of it. I used to like it when people dressed up for flying. I thought that was pretty cool. Like, it was a place to go and, take yourself, like, this trip has value to us as people. It means something, and rather than just sort of, I don't know. It sort of honors the occasion. I like that.
Yeah. I guess the question is, do you think there'll be some sort of circling back to what is old is new again? For instance, we have a way with fashion and with society, and sometimes with architecture and even automotive design and stuff like that, of looking back and going, well, look, gin was the most popular spirit in the 1930s and the 1920s, and then it all but left. I didn't know any gin drinkers when I was in high school.
I'm the only one you know.
Right. Nobody bought gin when I was a kid. We bought it. But now I like a gin martini.
Yeah, me too.
And so does the other guy. And now it's up, or rye whiskey. I didn't know. I knew it was in American Pie, the song, I did not know. But did not, now rye is back. So, do you think we might circle back to a time that was different?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who are, if they're not, personally acquainted with it, are aware that a sense of tradition might actually preserve a better way of life, might actually point to a better way of living with each other and within ourselves. I think there's a lot of that resonating with people now, and I think this movement of saying, let's get back to work, let's stop working from home, stuff like that is going to be helpful. I think people showing up for one another is helpful. I think them being locked in their prisons, basically, or within a prism, if you will, of sort of information age, and the handheld devices. I think people are maybe stepping away. I think my kids might actually throw them away one day. They love them, but they're not. They understand that it's a device that's meant to actually better your life rather than make your life, and that's been a very interesting thing. I think we may have. Now I'm going to go off the rails here a little bit. I think we may have abandoned one segment of our generation to the idea that they don't have to work to be anything. And unfortunately, they're going to be stuck in that. And but the one that's coming up after this, my kids now, my 12 to 7, I think they get that they're supposed to work hard and work out their own destiny and create it for themselves. And there's a group of people ahead of them who I think might be stuck, and we did that to them. And I feel kind of bad about that.
No, I first off, I agree. The saddest thing to me is when I talk to a male, because I'm old-fashioned career-wise, and the guy's 30, and I go, "What's the plan?" And they go, "I don't know." You go, "But
I got the same issue.
What's your career? What do you want to do?" And they go, "I don't know. I like movies." You go, "No, I know, but me too. But yeah, what are you doing with them?" And they go, "Well, Taste of Encino is coming up this weekend, and they have sushi there." And I go, "I know. I'm not talking about what sounds like fun. I'm talking about what's your purpose, what's the plan." And they kind of go, "I like Netflix," And it's like I go, "Wow, I feel sorry for them because I think the worst thing you can feel is rudderless, without purpose. You'd be better off trapped on an island trying to collect wood for a fire that night than just sort of hanging out with I have no idea why I'm here feeling."
That's exactly right. Thanks. Yep, that's it.
And
I think a few people may be left in that, lost there. I don't know for sure, but it seems like that. The more people I meet in at least our sort of immediate circles are okay with rudderless. And I think that's a shame.
No, I agree. And I think part of it is blurring the line between male and female. I think females can find purpose in a family and children to bear and as well as career and other things as well. But they're things they can do minus a career and minus a livelihood that give them a lot of purpose.
Oh, yeah.
When guys don't have that livelihood or that career, they, becomes video games or porn or whatever it is, they lose it pretty fast. They're wired to need that, even if they don't want to do the hard work of obtaining it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I concur. Yeah, that's you see that, and it's purposeless. Is not. It's not a good road to be on.
I wonder. It kind of makes me want to bring back like Job Corps and stuff like that, where it's like you take 18-year-olds who have no idea where they're going in life, and you just gather them up. I mean, I remember if you ever go to Red Rocks and you go to the big amphitheater that's been carved out of and you see the old pictures of the guys who built Red Rocks, there's a bunch of 15-year-olds with pickaxes. They were like, these were juvenile delinquents. They were on the road to nowhere but prison or death. And we gathered them all up and we made a camp and they went to work all day. Yeah. And they made this amphitheater. And now Blues Travelers can play there. And everyone's happy. And I'm like, now modern civilization would think you can't force a 16-year-old boy to work with a pick. You don't understand. You're helping that kid.
Yeah. When you're 14, you need a job.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I think that's exactly it. And my kids, I want my kids to be doing things. Of course, I don't want to get in trouble with, child labor laws, but I mean, my kids got to have some chores and get them done and be focused on getting them done. It's an important factor in your life, especially as a young man. You got to have something to do. And I think they've made a huge mistake with this, the minimum wage thing being so high. I mean, When I was 14, I got a job washing dishes at Denny's. Now, I lied about my age. I was supposed to be 15, but at least there was a path for a young man to understand what it was to earn a living. Not a great living, certainly, but I went to work and I worked 8-hour shifts from 11 o'clock to 6 in the morning. And well, it was 7 in the morning. And that was fantastic for me. And we've now blocked that for our kids. They're not allowed to work for anything less than $20 an hour. And who the hell is going to pay a kid who doesn't know what he's doing $20 an hour? So
I have this argument a lot, mostly with women, or my son. I said, let him work at the McDonald's up the street. First off, it's in La Cañada. It's a nice McDonald's, but let him work at the McDonald's. And they went, you don't want your son working? And I said, yes, I do want my son working at McDonald's. And they go, why should he? It's a lot of people going, he doesn't have to work at McDonald's. And I go, I know, he doesn't have to. He could. What does he need to work? I go, he could learn to work. How about that? Learn to work.
Showing up, taking orders, putting on a pair of pants,
punching the clock. I worked at McDonald's. It worked out for me. And they go, well, you had to work. Yeah, I did have to work at McDonald's, but I learned a lot while I worked there. And you worked at Denny's, and you worked graveyard at Denny's?
Yeah. Oh, it was great, though. I was in Florida.
Uh-huh.
So I'm in Fort Lauderdale. Oakland Park Boulevard, that Denny's is still there. I would take my little boat down there and tie it up at a boat yard and walk over to the Denny's. And around 4 a.m.
Why would you take a boat there?
Well, because I had a little boat when I was a kid. That's how I got around. That's how I got, that's how I got from place to place. Because, I needed independence. I needed to be able to move around.
You didn't have a driver's license because you were 14.
No, but I got my Power Squadron certificate that said I'd passed the safety test.
So you had a little motorboat.
Yeah.
And you could use that motorboat just offshore to sort of get around like someone would use a moped.
Exactly. That's
exactly.
But so 4 a.m., when the bars close in the county of Broward County, the most beautiful young women in the world would come in. And it was like a heady paradise that had walked into my room, basically. And I was there at the dishwasher kid. But it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen in my life. And I just dreamed of the days that I might actually get to talk to one of them or maybe even kiss one day. So this was it was perfect for me. It's a perfect element for me. And I did work really hard. And so I was pleased with that. And I could eat all the hot fudge sundaes I could eat.
So the bars would close at 4 a.m. versus 2 a.m. over here. And then, of course, everyone who was inebriated would always want to go out and get some comfort food, hash browns and all that stuff, right?
Exactly.
So they would spill into Denny's, which was open 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd be in the back at the station bussing and cleaning dishes. Yeah. And you would take your little motorboat there. You would leave your house at what time?
I would leave the house around 10 o'clock. It was about a half an hour drive down the Intercoastal Canal.
So about 10 p.m.
Yeah.
At 14.
Yeah.
And lash the boat to the dock and then go into Denny's, put your uniform on, do your things, and then you would leave. There would be light outside when you left.
Up 7 a.m., get home, go to sleep for a while. Yeah, that's how it was.
And was that a summer thing?
That was a summer job, yeah, summer job.
And your parents, not your biological dad, but the Powers.
Well, my mom.
Your mom?
My mom and my grandmother. That's where I was being raised, was my grandmother and my mom, and my sister was in the house at that time. We all lived that way, and I was basically the man of the house. I had to go out and do something. I was supposed to.
And they supported it.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, they were absolutely behind it.
Because most wouldn't let their 14-year-old head out at 10 p.m. only to come home at 8 a.m.
Well, I had a job.
You had a job. I know. I know these are the craziest things. I could remember my son wanting to go get frozen yogurt on a Saturday in La Cañada, one of the safest neighborhoods in the United States. And I said, yeah, go ahead. He was 9. I don't know. And my wife at the time started yelling at me, why'd you let him go? I said, it's 3 blocks. Let him go. It's like, he could be abducted. I was like, okay. And you could have had pirates take over your vessel when you were 14 and a half.
Yeah,
Heading
there you
to
go.
Denny's. Yes, a lot could happen. But I would like my son to have experiences and independence, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have gotten a lot from that. Getting the idea of just getting a paycheck at the end of every 2 weeks meant something, right?
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. That was fantastic. And before that, I worked other jobs. I worked labor jobs before that. I worked as a ditch digger the summer before that. I was 13 then, and that guy just paid in cash. So I'd make like $40 a day, and it was fantastic. He'd just hand you the money, and I worked all day, and I sweated and dug, and I came up dirty, and it was okay.
I too worked as a ditch digger. And not the metaphorical, you're going to end up digging ditches, but the literal, I dug.
Ditch.
Yeah, well, I dug footings on a construction site. It's the
that's
same,
all right. Yeah.
Same as a ditch.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what you got as an hourly wage at Denny's? Because they would have paid whatever the minimum would have been at the time.
Yeah, it was $1.35.
$1.35, and then they would take taxes out, right?
Yes, they would. Yeah, just about half. Still
and
crazy.
so you would end up $10 an hour. I mean, you would end up making like $41 a week or something.
About that, yeah. But I think $37.50. I think something like that was what I'd walk home with. But yeah, it was okay.
And did you present it to your mom?
No, that was for me. I put that in my bank account. Yeah,
And you saved that.
Yeah.
And so learning how to work, you learned how to work. You don't really learn how to dig ditches or learn how to wash dishes, although there's a part where you learn, but you get it pretty quick. It's more,
you catch on fast, yeah.
It's more about learning how to work, right?
Not being there, yeah. A little bit of pacing. I think that's a good lesson to learn. I learned that more on. I did construction the following year. Construction was good for learning about pacing, because if you were a laborer, you're cleaning out units, stuff like that. They expect you to do a certain number in a day, and you had to pace yourself so that you weren't exhausted in the morning.
Right.
So you just there was a steady thing that would happen, and that was a good learning curve thing too. That was good for understanding. Well, the goal is. It's more, it's the marathon thing instead of the sprint. But that was a good lesson too.
Homes.com knows that when it comes to home shopping, it's never just about the house or condo. It's about the home. And what makes a home is more than just a house or property. It's the location. It's the neighborhood. If you have kids, it's also schools, nearby parks, transportation options, all the above. That's why Homes.com goes above and beyond to bring home shoppers the in-depth information they need to find the right home. And when I say in-depth, I'm talking about deep. That's right. Each listing features comprehensive information about the neighborhood, complete with a video guide. They also have details about local schools with test scores, state rankings, and student-to-teacher ratio. They even have an agent directory with the sales history of each agent. So when it comes to finding a home, not just a house, this is everything you need to know, all in one place. Homes.com. Homes.com. We've done your homework. Yeah, I always remember, and I'm sure you remember, little snapshots of those kinds of tasks from back in those days, like little specific tasks.
Absolutely.
I remember one time getting dropped off at what is, it is the export place. God, I'll think Pier 1. Pier 1 in Santa Monica on Wilshire. Mm-hmm. And the company I work for basically built that place. But at some point, I got dropped off, and they just dropped me off, and they said, you're going to work here for a day. And I said, what's going on? And there was a huge pile of dirt, maybe the size of a minivan or two minivans. And then there was a shovel and a wheelbarrow. And about 80 feet away, there was a dumpster. And
take it there to there.
And they go, you take that from there and you put it in there and you push it up with the ramp and then you dump it and you go back and you do it again. And then they said, you will leave when you're done, not at 3:30. You'll just do it when you're done. And I remember starting to do things like count the number of scoops that I put into the wheelbarrow to see if it was too much. It was a little unwieldy. I couldn't get it up the ramp, but there was a certain number that was a sweet spot of a number of scoops of dirt. And then I would hit the ramp into the dumpster in a certain speed and counting the number of steps. It was sort of like, I think, what people do in solitary confinement,
Right.
And I would just count everything and start working and humming sort of things in myself and trying to make some distraction / logic out of this so as not to go stir crazy for $7 an hour at the time.
But sounds like kind of a meditation,
Yeah, but kind of learning what that was. And then also when you're going to do a show and they go, well, the first 2 shows sold out. You want to add a third show? I go, yeah. And they go, but really, that's 3 shows in one. And I go,
yeah,
that's
okay.
Yeah, that's nothing.
I like work. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, this barely constitutes as work considering what you did.
What we used to do. Right. Yeah. I know.
Right. So that it's good. It's a good base, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so you go from like work to what? When do you get off the construction site?
Well, I would go the construction site. That was basically a summer job as well. And then when school would start back up, I'd get back into my surfer schedule because I was a surfer as well. And so I'd get up at 4 a.m., go up coast, we call it, and then we'd surf for about an hour and a half, and then we'd jump back in the car and go down to school.
Wow.
And that was how we went about things. And then I met, then my junior year, somebody said, well, I should try doing a play. And I said, sure, okay. And I decided I was going to be an actor.
Did it come, I don't want to, make you sound immodest, but did it come kind of easily to you? Did you take
in some
to
way?
it?
But you know what it was? It was, I loved people. I love people. And the exposure I got to different kinds of people when I was doing those jobs we're talking about opened my mind to a lot of different things. And so I had life experience that probably was a bit more saturated than a kid of my age would have normally had. And it ended up being sort of the fuel for what I was able to do because I'd seen things. I understood people. I was always fascinated by them. I'd watch the way a guy would walk when I was a little kid and think, I wonder why he does that, and that's the work an actor does. That's what happens. That's the work a comic does. It figures out, what's going on in there? What's the reason for it? What's funny about it? What's that guy's motivation? And when you got a quirky mind like I think you have, and like I know I have, you start to come up with wonderful inventions about how that you got from one place to the next and how to connect the dots. And this is human behavior. Human behavior is our Bible. That's what we study. That's what we live by. And if you don't do that, you're not going to have enough stuff to be interesting when you're on camera.
Do you find that you may possess this affliction, which is not really bad, but Dr. Drew once diagnosed me with hypervigilance, which is happen to notice everything, and it usually bothers me, and as it would if you noticed everything.
Absolutely everything.
And so you find yourself noticing everything, and at the beginning, you don't know what to do with it. You want to talk about it, and people don't understand why you care so much about things that you don't really care about. You just notice a lot of things. Now, that's a road to comedy, but that's a road to performance, but it's probably a road to being a good detective as well.
For anything, I mean, human behavior is those kinds of things. You got to solve a human problem. Why did they do that? What's the reason for that? I think that's what that comes down to.
Yes.
You find whatever your angle is going to be. Maybe you are a detective. Maybe you're a comedian. Maybe you're an actor. whatever. But yeah, my son Gabriel is afflicted with this. I know he is. He's 10 years old. He asks me questions constantly about what I think being 6'9" is like instead of being 6'7".
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Well, you know what I think you'll find with Gabriel, I think he will end up doing what I ended up doing. And now my son sort of has it as well, which is studying patterns.
Yeah.
And also there's a sidebar, which I'll just give you as one dad to the next. What goes along with hypervigilance is an inability to sleep really well because you hear everything and you feel everything and you're constantly woken up and you notice too much. I'm telling you, an eye mask, a shade and a white noise machine will help Gabriel if he has the vigilance.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I think he has got it. Yeah, that's actually really good. Yeah, he needs me to sort of, he always says, Dad, will you wrap your arm around me so I can kind of get to sleep?
Oh, that's sweet.
Sure, babe. I'll lie there next to him.
But
off he goes.
But Dad's in Canada shooting a feature, so.
Oh, I know. Then we're screwed up. Yeah.
That's where the eye mask comes in.
His mom, she says to his mom, will you come down? She says, no.
Yeah.
Go to sleep. And so.
There's a thing, and maybe you tell me if Gabriel has this, but I realized my son, I think, has a little of that, the hypervigilance. I had it because he's a pattern studier. And when you study patterns, you start to sort of see things in advance, and it's pretty simple. They're guests on this show, and some comedian or actor or whatever been on the show multiple times, and I'll say, be prepared to start early because this guy tends to show up early. So we may want to be in place early because that's the pattern I've studied from this person who I don't really know very well, but they've been on a couple of times and I noticed they showed up early the 2 times they came out. But the thing that was funny with my son is I got myself into a predicament, which is my mother passed. She was old. And we had a, fair to middling kind of relationship, but never really a great relationship. And my mom had not a great relationship with me and barely a relationship with my kids. So that when she passed, I never told my son or my daughter she passed, and because of my untraditional family, I knew there wouldn't be a wake or a funeral or anything we'd have to attend. So, and I was being lazy and I was procrastinating. I was like, I know I should tell my kids, but I just don't. It doesn't seem like there's a good time, and I just don't want to say anything, and they don't talk to her anyway, so they're never going to know, and they're in high school, and they don't care about that, and so on and so forth. So at some point, Christmas, about 3 years ago, came about, and I spoke to my stepdad, and he said, I'm coming for Christmas, and would you mind if I brought my new girlfriend? And I thought, no, that's fine. I'm glad you have a new girlfriend. And then I realized I haven't told my kids who will be there.
It's going to be at Christmas.
That my stepdad, your grandpa, he's going to show up with his new girlfriend and not mom. And she's gone. And
so what happened?
Well, what happened was it got down to the night before. And the night before, I was with Anthony Anderson at Jimmy Kimmel's house, and he was laughing hysterically that I was in this predicament that I had to tell my kids. And so it was the day of before Christmas or whatever, and I was driving with my son, and I was taking him to get his license at the DMV, or at least try to get his license. And I just was driving the car kind of thinking about it the whole time, but not waiting for some sort of opening to say something. And I just looked at him and I go, hey, by the by, I don't know if I remembered to tell you, but, my mom, your grandma, she passed not too long ago. It'd been like 9 months. I go, I can't remember, but it's been a minute. But anyway, she's gone. And So your stepdad, John's probably maybe bringing somebody other than mom, of the house. And he just sort of nodded and he didn't say anything. And then he looked at me and he goes, I didn't tell him about my stepdad. I didn't tell him. I just said, your mom's passed. And I just thought, my mom's passed. I thought you should know. And he goes, why are you telling me now? And I go, just thought you should know.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, based on what? And I go, that's nothing, just thought you should know. Why are you telling me now? Because I was like, oh, the jig's up.
Yeah.
My stepdad's showing up with a new squeeze.
Right.
But he knew the rhythm, he knew the pattern, and he was suspicious that I just volunteered this on this ride to the DMV, not attached to something else. That he knew that was motivated. So he got the rhythm of it. You know what I mean?
Not a smart kid.
Yeah, I think Gabriel's your son's name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get a lot past him.
No, he's not. No, there's no point. No point in even trying. He's just a very, very astute, observant young man who wants to know about things. And he's great. I mean, he inspires me.
And were you that when you were a young lad?
I think so. Yeah, I think I was kind of like that. Yeah.
And you were just sort of studied behavior, human behavior, life.
I love watching people. Yeah, that's been my thing for my whole life. It's still there. I still love it. That's why it's endlessly fascinating to me. I mean, there's some stories, going in, you go say, well, I know this story already. I don't need to live it again. I once wrote myself a note. I was going out with somebody who was still in their 20s, and I thought, well, I'm not in my 20s anymore. Why should I be in anybody else's? And that was a clear, positive observation for me to have made at the time. So I moved comfortably into my 40s at that point.
And so began the career and pretty much never had another job, correct?
Yeah. I was a waiter. I wanted to be an actor. I went to San Diego for a while, and I worked at the Shakespeare Festival for 3 seasons. And then I moved back to New York, where I'd gone to school. And it was there that I was a waiter for a while, and a busboy and a waiter. And I was a pretty good waiter. And but one day I said to myself, you can't wait tables anymore. You have to stop now because you want to be an actor. And so I said to the manager, his name was Michael, I said, Michael, I know this comes at a bad time, but I got to go. And he said, well, we're just starting the lunch shift. I said, I know, and I'll work the lunch shift, but I got to go. I'm quitting today. And he said, you know what? I got this. You go ahead and go. And it was cool. That afternoon, I auditioned for a show I got, and I've been an actor ever since.
Yeah, so let's talk about the sort of trusting that internal voice, that instinct, being sort of in tune and knowing sort of when to leave and when to stay. And I've definitely can I understand that and had a few of those moments where I just said, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to do that. And someone went, what are you doing? What kind of sense does this make? It doesn't make any practical sense. It only makes sense if you're in tune with yourself enough to kind of understand what you're doing, even if you don't intellectually understand it. It's more of a vibration, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely what it is. I mean, there's just a thing that happens, and you get there, and it's a realization. Whatever, God hits you on the head, whatever you want to call it. You've clearly had moments like that. I mean, you ended up where you are. This is. I remember watching you for 30 years ago, thinking that guy's pretty funny. I like him. And then there were a couple of things you said, and I went like, oh, wait a minute. I think he might even be on my team. I wasn't sure still because
Hollywood types.
Yeah, right, but still, I thought, he's making some sense to me, and I've always really admired your work.
Oh, well, I feel the same about you, and I also feel there's a certain pragmatism that you get off the construction site or McDonald's or Denny's. There's a instilled pragmatism that. The construction site is one big sort of pragmatic experiment,
Absolutely.
and there's a hierarchy, and there's an entire thing to negotiate there. And it's the kind of thing that if you lose track of things, you definitely will lose a finger.
Yeah, you're out
along the way as well. So there's a real kind of gravity to it, and it almost forces you to be that person.
Yeah.
That's sort of, and you don't get to say, when de Blasio is over there in New York City and he goes, well, if one person dies of COVID, that's one too many. You don't get to say that because you're like, many people will die of COVID. Now, what we'd like is the least amount of people to die of COVID. But the proclamation that one is one too many, that's in the rearview mirror. That's already happened.
Doesn't do me any good.
And right.
When Cuomo stood up and said, I'm undocumented, I thought,
right.
What are you talking about?
Right. It's a proclamation that does nothing for anybody.
Absolutely nothing. Yeah.
And I'm the same way, too. It's like when on the construction site, when the scaffolding gives way and falls down and 3 people get injured, no one goes, this is unacceptable. They just go, how do we fix the scaffold?
How are we going to fix this?
And how do we fix these guys? But you can announce it's unacceptable, except for it already happened.
We already know that. Yeah, right.
We already know that, and it happened. Yeah, right. And evidently it is acceptable because it just happened.
Or you can say, I can't wait till we get to scaffolding 2.0.
That's right. That's right. So maybe there is a new pragmatism that is kind of sweeping in, and only because of the vacuum that we've been living in for a while.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think that's what's happening. I think people are finally waking up and saying, you know what, this bunch is hollow, and they're not actually looking out for anybody. They're looking out for themselves, and that's not the job.
Yeah, and the job is not to shovel out platitudes. It's to have reservoirs that are filled and fire hydrants that work, and then all the platitudes after that, that's just so much window dressing. It's really sort of neither. Look, if you are compassionate, warm, and friendly once all this is done, then that's fine. That's icing on the cake. As a Patriots fan, you want Bill Belichick to be a steely-eyed winning coach. That's all. If it turns out his team and his family like him as well, that's great, but that's kind of gravy. You want the Super Bowl rings.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
I'm trying to think about what happens. I mean, I'm still sort of stuck in this haze of trying to figure out what drives people to want to represent people but not represent them, not actually do the job, to view all these assignments or these victories that you're elected to do as stepping stones to some other place where you do just as little. I don't quite understand it. My granddad fought forest fires when he was 16 years old. He belonged to some sort of like volunteer, like National Guard for youth group in 1907, whatever it was. And he told me the scariest thing he ever did was fight a forest fire. This from the guy that fought in Guadalcanal. It was fascinating to me, and I thought, well, everybody who lives in California knows that we live in a high fire possibility state, a place where at any time, if you're not vigilant about fighting a fire, you're going to get burned. And you of course, are a sitting example right now, although you came out reasonably unscathed on this last venture. But, it's happened for years around us all the time. And it seems to me that this is a masterpiece of ill planning and lack of readiness in a place where readiness is the only job you have.
Yes.
For this particular thing.
So I have this thought, and you can feel free to agree or disagree, but every job has a fun and glamorous and walk down the red carpet part and be the toast of Sundance part. And then there's a very nuts and bolts, long hours, early mornings, part of the business. And this is every business, and show business is no different. It has a very early morning, long hour, tedious kind of part. And then there's get dressed up and be the toast of the town. And I think politics has a kind of fun part where you're celebrated and you're getting the key to the city and the local whatever group has made you this and that and the other. And then there's just a very mundane, nuts and bolts, boring, doesn't sound exciting. When you hear Gavin Newsom speak, he says, come to California where you're free to love, and I'll protect you, and I'll protect your rights to love who you want to love, but no one ever really talks to him about, workman's comp issues and issues with, the union and the guys who work the sewage facility at the union are going to go on strikes, or a sewage facility may go offline. These are very, who wants to deal with that? I want to walk the red carpet,
I want to be important, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the aqueducts and things of that nature and the fire hydrant stuff, that feels unsexy to these people. And these people are here more as mascots than actual public servants. They like the idea of the red carpet. And by the way, Hollywood toasts them. You know what I mean? Like they love it. And
they keep putting them in there.
You can get Bradley Cooper on the phone in 10 minutes if you need to, and he'll come down and do your benefit or whatever that is. And I think they fall in love with that part of it. But they're not in love with the off season where they're in the weight room at 7 a.m. throwing around iron, trying to get better for when the season starts. They like game time, but they're not prepared for the lights. And I think that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
And the more we elect them based on a look, a vibe, sometimes a DEI score, the more they do it based on that, the worse they're going to be at those jobs. Well,
I'll tell you a quick story.
You want your accountant to be a boring guy with a receding hairline.
Tom Menino used to be the mayor of Boston, and we were great friends. He was I met him one of the Cheers trips years ago, and we stayed in touch. And Tom Menino would go over a bump in the road, or like a hole, or a little pothole that he bumped into, and he'd get out of his car and take his Instamatic camera or Polaroid camera and take a picture of it and write down the location and give it to the highway supervisor when he got to his office, and he'd say, "You got to go take care of this pothole." That's the kind of guy I want to be running this, or the town, or the state. The guy that says, "Wait a minute, I saw a tree line out there the other day. That's pretty hazardous. Maybe we should start talking about clearing brush near there. And maybe we should go ahead and reinstate the idea that we need to harvest some of our lumber, our potential, our forest, so that we can actually control it and be responsible keepers of the state." But that's way too much to do. I mean, it's not.
Well, they don't get patted on the back for that. There's no accolades for that. That is just the nuts and the bolts stuff. And the more we move from those old school guys that you just spoke of into a sort of a celebrity, then we're going to attract less of those people and sort of more AOCs, where there's no nuts and bolts. There's more of a look and a vibe and an attitude. And also, look, we asked for it and we got it. We decided that this is what we want. We decided, like, wouldn't it be great if a woman, or better yet, a woman of color ran, and it's like, no, it'd be best if we just had the most qualified person and who worked weekends and holidays and took Polaroids of potholes and sent them. That person could very well be a woman of color. I'm fine with it, but just make sure that doesn't supersede the part where they take pictures of the potholes. And when we get back to that, then I think that's where the pragmatism comes in. But I do not know if that is attracting those types. We had a choice between Karen Bass, our current mayor, and Rick Caruso. And I can tell you, my mom, as a, very well progressive, hippie, dippy kind of woman, would have found Rick Caruso boring. You know what I mean? Like, come on, just some old white dude. Oh, I get it. He's a rich white dude. We don't need any of that. This is more dynamic and more interesting. And also, you could say you were involved with having the first female of color elected to this position. And meanwhile, now everything's on fire. And so you need, look, whether it's your babysitter or your mayor, you better get back to boring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. There are times I'm driving down the road and I hear that someone else has come up with a statement that says, we're going to make this a sanctuary for sexual reassignment surgery for children. I'm thinking, are you telling me you're going to perform a forced sterilization on an underage person, and that you're going to call that a sanctuary? And this stuff sounds sexy to people, I think.
Yes.
But to me, it sounds like you're committing a crime.
Well, I agree, but it's all stuff they get kudos for at a cocktail party,
Yeah,
especially in Hollywood. Which my last question for you is, I've talked to the John Voights of the world and many of those who have managed.
I was here at the house a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, he's a great guy. A great guy.
Wonderful
But
guy.
you managed to navigate Hollywood even when you went against popular opinion in a game where you can be blackballed. But I feel like Voight and you at a certain level with the ability and the talent can sort of transcend the politics of Hollywood. True?
Yeah. I think what happens is that the industry, the quiet side of the industry, knows that, oh no, I want to give that guy a job because he's reliable. He's going to show up, do his job, and we can believe him in the role. It's great. That's what John is for sure. And I've had the same kind of thing. I've got a good track record with comedy and sort of, serious comedy or accommodating a certain role. But I went to a Golden Globe party once, years ago, a luncheon that they held for people who'd won one once and whatever. And I was talking to my publicist at the time, Stan Rosenfield, and I said, it's interesting. I mean, I don't really have a film career. And he said, well, that's because, everybody's, your politics are wrong. And I said, well, but what does that really have to do with anything? He said, I don't know. But see that guy over there? He was pointing at Steven Spielberg. He said, you'll never work for him.
Right.
And he pointed at a couple of other people and said, you'll never work with that guy either. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It turned out to be true. It's like, that's just the way it is. Okay. So I got to work. I didn't get to do that work. It's okay. I tried to get into the Film Academy, right? The Academy of Film Arts or whatever they call it now, Oscars. And I was denied. No, I don't really know why. I mean, I had a letter of recommendation from Helen Mirren and from Sylvester Stallone. And I've done about somewhere between 50 and 70 movies in my lifetime. And they just didn't say I was member material. So,
Yeah.
that's life.
No.
I mean, Robert Redford started Sundance. Right now, Sundance, the people who run it, they wouldn't want a guy that looks like Robert Redford to be there.
It's so funny because the second you talked about the Academy, I just thought Sundance. I've made plenty of award-winning documentaries, very high on the Rotten Tomatoes meter, been rejected by Sundance every single time.
I think that may have something to do with it.
It may have, knowing Kelsey Grammer may have something to do with me being rejected from Sundance. Kelsey, always great to catch up with you. Wish You Were Here is the name of the movie. It's touching, it's endearing, it's a little bit of a tearjerker, and it's good. And it's available as we speak. Kelsey, I hope you come back anytime you like. Anytime there's a project you want to plug, we'll do it.
Thanks, buddy.
Or maybe me, you, and John will just get one of those gin martinis.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds even better.
Thanks, buddy. Take care, Kelsey. O'Reilly Auto Parts. Bam! You know the song, right? They're in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offers friendly, helpful service and all the parts and knowledge you need to maintain and repair your automobile. Always been an O'Reilly guy. Used to go to the one out in North Hollywood when I was over there. Then I moved to La Crescenta. Went to the one up on Foothill. Still swing by there every once in a while because I'm a hands-on guy. So whether you're a car aficionado or an auto novice, you'll find the employees at O'Reilly Auto Parts are knowledgeable, helpful, and best off, they're friendly because some of those auto parts guys can be a little tough around the edges. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today, or you can visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/Adam. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/Adam. Well, you want to start a business, your own business, a small business, and grow it this year. Let's do this. And now's the best time to start. Shopify is going to help you. I started a business, and I use Shopify, and I'm glad I did. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. Get your store up and running. It's easy, and they've got thousands of customizable templates that can help you with all the details like shipping, taxes, payments, from one single dashboard, allowing you to focus on the important stuff like growing your business, because you want to be freed up to grow your business, not burdened with the nickel and dime stuff. Let Shopify help you with that. With Shopify, your first sale is closer than you think. It's Shopify, right, Dawson?
Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Carolla, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Carolla to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/Carolla.
Well, it's good to catch up with my old friend Pete Berg. The series is something we can get into. It's a limited series, American Primeval, available on Netflix as we speak. And we'll get into that. Also, some commercials for the NFL to get into, as well as many other things. Pete Berg's an actor, director, mainly turned director, writer, old school Hollywood type, I would say.
Hey.
Throwback. Good to see you, Pete.
I appreciate that. You're an old school Hollywood type. You're a classic. You're an icon, and you're one of the good guys, man. You always have been. Always have been.
Well, God bless you, Pete. Ran into Pete at the UFC fight because Pete loves the sweet science. And I think most of us that enjoyed boxing early on just sort of transitioned into UFC because it's really just boxing plus sort of thing, I would imagine. But our hearts are still into the sweet science of pugilism.
Dana White has made it impossible to not love UFC. And, I think for me, I get going on this, man, but like boxing is so broken. It's such a deeply broken sport. There's no leadership. You've got all this chaos and disorganization with the different promoters and the different governing bodies and the belts and the weight classes. And Dana just came in and said, this is going to be like the NFL, the MLB, the NBA. There's going to be one league. There's going to be one commissioner. I'm going to run it. There's leadership, and the whole sport falls in line. So it's hard not to love the UFC and what Dana's done.
Well, ultimately, as a fan, and I'll spread this out from sports into politics, you just want to know that the two best fighters or the two best teams or the two best 185-pounders are there. Are showing up. And the reason the NFL is so satisfying is it's the two best teams that are going to play in the Super Bowl, and that's just how it works every single year. You can quibble about a couple of bad calls here and there, but you can't really question that those are the two best teams that represent. You want that in the ring, you want that in the octagon, you want that in Congress as well. And when we start questioning that, that's when you lose faith in the sport.
Yeah, man. And like in tennis, generally the two best players end up in Wimbledon in the finals, or in golf. The best guy usually wins, and it's a show. In boxing, it's people are trying to preserve their W's, and they don't have access to the other good fighters. You can't make the fights, and it sucks. It's a bummer, and I'm really hoping that Dana and TKO come in and take over boxing, just the way they did with the UFC. So I scream that all the time.
You start off where in this country before you come to California?
I was in my mother's stomach at Yankee Stadium cheering for the Giants back in the early 1960s. I came out of her stomach in New York City. So I'm a New Yorker.
And when did you come out to Los Angeles? And was it always eventually to write and direct, or because it was all about acting at the beginning, right?
Right. So I went to college in St. Paul, Minnesota, and long, bizarre series of events lined up, and I ended up getting involved in theater and little filmmaking in Minnesota, mainly because my college had a horrible theater department. They didn't have any bodies. They were about to shut it down. And my faculty advisor, Dan Kaiser, said, please take acting one. Like you have to take an arts course. It's an automatic A, and we need the bodies. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And I started taking these acting classes, loved them, got A's, turned into playwriting and play directing, and then a little bit of filmmaking. And my dad, who was in advertising in New York, started getting progressively more agitated and stressed that I seemed to be moving in this direction. And when it was time to graduate, he came to me and told me that he had helped secure me a job at Lehman Brothers, the investment company. And I said, well, thanks, Dad, but I'm going to go to California and Hollywood. And I think I'm going to learn about, film and all that. And he said, don't do it. You're making a big mistake. I said, Dad, I really want to try it. He said, don't. I said, I'm going to. He said, well, okay, I'll tell you one thing. You're going to end up making those gay pornos. That's what you're going to end up doing. And he stared at me and I stared at him. And I'm like, well, thanks, Dad, for the encouragement. And I went, despite his warning. And to this day, those words are in the back of my head. And I think are part of what motivate me to work hard so that I don't have to pursue that line of work. And so far, so good.
Yeah, well, I don't think there are any more rules. There used to be rules about you either did TV or you did theatrical stuff or you did commercials. You turn on the TV, you see A-listers all over commercials for big popular brands. McDonald's, John Cena's doing a McDonald's commercial. Like, there used to be a whole lot of rules about what you could do and what lane you couldn't veer into as a director, as a writer, as an actor. It's kind of no rules now, right? You can direct a commercial, you can direct a theatrical, you can pop up in a series, you can direct a series. Like, it's kind of nice, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, I've always felt that way, kind of, in that, especially with directing. I direct a lot of commercials. I direct a lot of documentaries. I direct doc series, TV shows, scripted, and movies. And people ask me, do I like one more than the other? And for me, the truth is, it's all one big kind of creative journey for me. And if I'm directing a commercial, like last week, I directed a Super Bowl commercial, and I had every bit as much creative stimulation as doing that as I did doing American Primeval or any movie I've ever done. I've found that I've been able to kind of flow through different mediums. And I think definitely as far as acting goes, Robert De Niro's got a limited series coming out next week on Netflix that I think is going to be really good. My friend Eric Newman produced it, and it's very fluid now.
I agree.
It's like the kids talk about everything's fluid today. People are sexually fluid. They're emotionally fluid. People are politically fluid. And I think I have no problem with that. And I think our business is definitely fluid like that. You can do anything. And if the work's good, the work's good.
No, I agree. And I do some docs and some books and some stuff that's different too. And I think there's something challenging. Like when I used to work for the Man Show or when I used to do the Man Show, we do 1 minute commercial parodies, and you got to get it all in 1 minute,
Challenging.
And people think, well, that's a lot easier than a 90-minute doc. And it's like, no, it's harder. It's sort of the difference between a logo and a saying or verbiage, meaning The most brilliant thing you can have is a brilliant logo where someone is going 70 miles an hour down the highway and they look up and they see the billboard and they recognize exactly what that company is. You know, it's Apple, it's Coca-Cola, you know what I mean? And you go, there's a simplicity to it, but there's a brilliance in the simplicity. It can be read at 70 miles an hour at night.
Yeah, it's very challenging. And not only can it be read and identified, but it has emotional resonance. You actually feel something,
right?
Whether it's, comfort, or it could be disdain if you don't like the product, but hopefully it's not. And now what they're really into, and I can't remember the term, but the audio component of a logo, like when Netflix comes on and you hear that ba-bum.
Yeah, right.
That you've got the visual with the audio, and there's companies that specialize in making the audio companion to the logo that have the ability in 2 notes to lock you in and hold you, and that's cool. That goes back to, like, remember the old the AOL, that
right,
that old, like when the modem was signing in, and that was one of the first ones I remember. You heard that audio companion to the logo and you get locked in. It's really hard to do that. So commercials for me are a real challenge. And one of the cool things about, as a director doing commercials, a lot of big department heads, like cinematographers, costume designers, production designers, Academy Award winners, when they're in between movies, they like to do commercials. Because it's generally pretty good money, but it's also just a way to keep busy. So for me, when I'm directing a commercial, I can reach out and find new people to work with that I normally and you get to sort of trial run with each other for 3 days, and it's a great way to kind of, I don't know, network and meet people that you might not normally get to work with. And these are some of the best people in the business, so that's always fun.
Yeah, the Super Bowl commercials are a great little science fair of life. Like, here's everyone's offering, and you get to walk past all the tables and see the kid's volcano and his celestial star system and like whatever's going on in that kid's head. And you take 1 minute in front of every table and then you declare a winner.
Yeah, and it's competitive.
And it's really interesting because it's I feel like it's kind of, maybe not uniquely American, but it is like a very American art form, this 1 minute long creative endeavor that needs to satisfy a bunch of different masters. It's got to be funny, or it's got to be heartfelt, or it's got to be interesting or smart, and we got to get the product in there, and sometimes there's a call to action, Yeah.
It's Super Bowl commercials, I think, are fascinating too, because for everything you just said, they're like kind of like a bake sale, like when you'd go to school back in the day and it would be bake sale day and everyone would bring in their best secret recipe, right? So like grandma's chocolate butterscotch chip cupcake and caramel peanut butter whatever's, and everyone would sort of be like, this is my special thing. And it was interesting because it was people reaching in to create the very best caramel brownie they could possibly create, right? And with commercials, Super Bowl, you have all these agencies, which most people don't know about or care about, and I don't know why they would, but if you know the business, companies like 72 Sunny and Chiat Day and Droga and, tons of them, these are pretty talented people who work, year-round servicing clients. But then if they get a Super Bowl spot, they lock in. And like the butterscotch brownies, everyone tries to bring their absolute very best. And they don't always work, but they really hope that they will work. So you're getting to see people who are having, from my end as a director, you meet these agency folks and the creatives, and everyone is going all in. So you get the feeling that you're working with people they realize that this is kind of like their big moment to shine.
Well, it's their Super Bowl.
It's theirs, exactly. It's their Super Bowl, and I kind of like that, and I feel the pressure, and I want to try and deliver for them, and it's fun. It's competitive, and it is it is judged, and there is a winner, and everyone knows that there's going to be a winner. It's the USA Today's ad meter, which no one knows. Like I guess back in the day when the USA Today was really, a big important paper. Not to disrespect them today, but right, no paper is. But the USA Today somehow position themselves as the authority, the judge for the Super Bowl commercial. So if you win the ad meter, the USA, which I've won twice, thank you. I'm very proud to say I've won it twice.
Wait, which two commercials, sorry?
I won it with a Kevin Hart Hyundai commercial where Kevin Hart played a dad who was trying to follow his daughter on a date to make sure that the boy behaved himself.
Right, remember that.
That was one. And then I won it, I think, the next year for that NFL 100 Super Bowl spot, which was like a big banquet.
Yeah, where they ran and the ball got loose and everyone dove. And oh my God, that must have been crazy to film.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun because we had every great football player from Jim Brown to, I think, Saquon was a rookie that year. We had like, 60 Hall of Famers in this banquet, just attacking each other viciously, and it was fun, and it was actually quite emotional because you got to sort of see the timeline of NFL greats all in one room, and they were just very casual with each other. So it worked on a couple of levels. But they called and they're like, "We won the Super Bowl," and I'm like, "We did." I didn't even know that was a thing, but then I found out it was a thing, and I was very excited and proud of all of us for, working hard and winning something. It's always good to win something, Adam. Always good to win something.
I agree. Right? So, so full disclosure, we're recording this before the Super Bowl, so that's why I'm not referring to the specific commercial that Pete Berg directed. But the thing about, I've dealt with a lot of corporate stuff, and and they say they want it to be funny, and they want your flavor, and they want the reason they hired you is because of your unique talents and the way you see life. And then at some point they start getting nitpicky about verbiage and about things they will do and won't do, and sometimes the creative process is damaged in that process. Right. And if you get enough juice, like Pete's got enough juice, he can probably override a lot of that, but it's still, at the end of the day, those people are cutting the checks. So how do you deal with that? Have you had any epic battles?
So the way I deal with it, like particularly for the big spots, like, okay, I just did a Super Bowl spot for the NFL. I think we can say that. And, this is their big commercial. It's a 2-minute, sometimes longer commercial. It's the, it'll be the longest commercial on the Super Bowl. So there's a lot of pressure. And you've got an ad agency. And in the case of the NFL, it's an agency called 72 and Sunny, which is a really great ad agency, very successful agency, based in LA, but they've got offices all over. And then so that's the agency, and then you've got the client, which is the NFL, right? And that's a pretty powerful client. And that sounds intimidating on the surface, this big agency and this big brand, the NFL. But I've done it long enough to know that, well, the big agency are just a bunch of human beings, and their president is a guy named Glenn, who I know and is a good guy, and he wants to win. And the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of the NFL, is a guy named Tim, and he's a good guy too. And so I know them, and what I like to do, so normally when you do a commercial, the director is on the set, and everyone else has to be in these tents away from the director. They're not allowed to talk to the director. So if anything wants to get relayed, there has to be an intermediary. It's like negotiating a hostage release in the Middle East, right? You've got to go on. And so then it gets very stressful, and the message comes back that they want Marshawn Lynch to hold the football 2 inches lower. And that's a 2-hour extend, it goes on forever. And so what I learned to do is I take the two main guys, Glenn and Tim, who I like, And I let them stand right with me on the set. And while we're going and I'm directing, I'm like, what do you think? And they'll have an idea, and we can actually, I make peace with them, and I try and bring them into the creative process rather than trying to resist it, because you'll never win if you try and resist it. It's
Right.
like trying to swim against a raging river. You're going to lose. So I've learned over the years, the way you get away around that nitpicking and micromanagement is to try and include them. And I think that, they have enough faith in me because I've done this long enough that they do trust me. So the whole process is relatively peaceful and it doesn't go the way you earlier described. However, a young director that hasn't experienced it, I could see just getting like Derrick Henry plowing over them. You got to kind of know how to handle the situation.
I don't know why it popped in my head. We're talking about advertising. I hate it when you have a killer idea, and this must have happened. It's happened to everyone who's engaged in this process, but you come up with an idea and you love this idea and you think you're going to do it and it never happens.
Yeah.
Which is, I met with the guys from Ford, and Ford was like, we have the 50th anniversary of the Mustang coming up. This is a couple of years ago, and they wanted to do a commercial. And I said, I got an idea. What if we did the movie Bullet, the iconic Steve McQueen movie Bullet, and they show, all him through San Francisco and jumping the car down the streets and getting sideways everywhere. But we told you the story of the little known item that nobody knows, which is Bullet had a partner in that movie, and it was my dad in 1971. And he was riding shotgun in that car. And it would be me with a big 70s fro and a 70s, turtleneck and leather jacket, just screaming and hanging on to the dash, yelling, slow down. And then we'd cut to the exterior of the car getting sideways. And we'd cut back to me spilling coffee all over myself, yelling, slow down again. And then we'd go back again. And I'd be doing something insane each time we got back to the interior of the car. And we'd use the actual footage from Bullet, the exterior stuff, and tight on Steve McQueen. And then they'd cut to me in the passenger seat with a giant fro wig on, screaming, slow down. And they were like, oh, that'll be so funny. And I'm like, it would be so funny. Like, I can see it in my head. I'm cutting it together in my head, Never happened.
Wow. Yeah. And so did you pitch that to Ford or to Ford's agency?
I pitched it to Ford, I think, when I was in Dearborn. And I should have, I think it's before, the guy who runs Ford is Chris Farley's cousin.
Yes, that's right. Jim
Farley.
Yeah.
Nicest dude.
Yeah.
Nicest dude you've ever met, or maybe you have met him.
I met him.
Loves to do the vintage racing. I do the vintage racing, so I see him at the track all the time. The most gracious guy in the world, and maybe if I could have got, and looks like Chris Farley, which is funny.
I actually met him, a really good guy. Here's the problem, right? You never had a chance at him because
yeah, I know.
What happens is if you go to a brand like Ford with a great idea, and your idea is great, and I didn't know that was your dad, and I'm fascinated to hear that. I'd love to hear more, but.
Oh, that's all a goof. That he didn't exist. I just made. The whole goof is that I play my dad in the recreation.
But was your dad really in the movie?
No, my dad's never left his house.
Okay.
Sorry.
Great. Well, I'd love to meet your dad at some point. But you pitch an idea to Ford, or you pitch an idea to the agency that represents Ford, and you don't have a chance, because if you say you have a great idea and you pitch it to the Ford, and then you leave, then Farley's going to call the agency. I don't know who Ford's ad agency is, and say, Carolla just came in here and gave us this great idea. And what they will do is they'll say, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. And they'll probably think it is. And then slowly they'll kill it, because if they take your idea, they have no job. That just means that they failed And because all their job is to come up with ideas like that 24/7. Suddenly you come in out of nowhere with a better idea. They're never going to take it because it would just be a huge acknowledgement that you're a football fan, right?
Sure.
You saw this tight end on the Ravens drop the ball last week.
I did.
Right. So I was pitching the NFL and the agency 2 days ago. I said, God, you guys, because it was so amazing how Lamar Jackson came up to him, and said, "Hey man, come on, we're a team. We don't win or lose as one person. This isn't on you." And I guess the Buffalo fans made a huge donation to his charity. And I thought it was very interesting the way people rallied around him. And I said, you guys could do a whole spot on what happens when a player makes a horrific mistake and he's failed and he's humiliated and devastated, and how the league holds that player and says, look, get up, man. You're going to get up. We're going to survive. It's not, and I thought that was an interesting moment to seize upon, underrepresented, when something horrific happens, and a interception or a fumble or a drop or a really bad injury. The way that, and I'm pitching this and I'm getting all excited, and I can see this really emotional spot, and they're nodding, and it was the NFL and the agency, and I'm like in the back of my mind going, they'll never do it. Because their minds are going, yeah, that's a good idea, but we can't let Pete have that idea because then we don't have an idea. And then I walked away. And it won't happen, but it would be a really good idea.
I agree. I mean, we've come a long way since Bill Buckner. I mean, that was a life sentence for him, essentially. And we've evolved quite a bit. I think it's a good sign as a society that we pick these people up. We wouldn't have done to Bill Buckner today what we did to Bill Buckner all those years ago.
There was a soccer player in South America, a goalie, right, who let in a goal and the cartels killed him.
I don't think, well, I'm sure that has happened. It wasn't that he let in a goal. I think he kicked a goal against his own team.
He did.
By mistake. And
okay.
I don't know if it was a goalie or not, but somebody screwed up and kicked a goal against their own team and had him killed. Yeah, so that's how they do it in Medellin.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember exactly what it was, but somebody led up a goal or was responsible for a goal against their own team, and they were killed. So I don't know.
Pete,
there's something there.
Oh man, I got to pitch you. I'm going to pitch you my football movie idea.
What do you got?
Because you love sports.
This is just between you and me, though, right?
Friday Night Lights, I know. But I'm serious about this one. They do that thing in sports every once in a while where the mob gets hold of the quarterback and pays him off to have a bad day at the Super Bowl. And but there's eyes on the quarterback, and there's eyes on the kicker, and there are eyes on the stars of the game. But nobody watches the long snapper. The long snapper is making the league minimum. First off, you can't bribe Patrick Mahomes. He's got too much money and too many endorsements.
Oh.
But the long snapper's making the league minimum.
You mean for the punt or for the extra point field goal?
It's usually the same guy.
Okay, you're right then. That's a valuable guy that's under the radar. I like it.
Right. We don't know his name, and he's making the league minimum. Now, in our story, Pete, they could kidnap his daughter.
Yeah.
And hold it. Now, this guy, all he has to do is snap one over the punter's head and snap one bad field goal, and we just shaved about 10 points. Here, just fire one over the punter's head, the ball will carry him all the way back to the other end zone. The other team will fall on it, and or one bad field goal snap. No one will know it, not provable, no one says a word, and they wouldn't pull him after the bad punt snap. They don't have another snapper. He just have a bad game.
I like it. Would you go happy ending though? Like the long snapper at the end finds his integrity and realizes that it's about more than him, and he's going to figure out a way to free his daughter and make the good snap so they can win the game? Or would you go darker and like he throws the game and they don't ever give him his daughter back and you just go really dark? Well, how you going?
I don't know. I think you'd end up making it feel goody and redemption and that kind of stuff. I just became intrigued with the notion that this guy, while everyone else is making $30 million a year, this guy makes $375 a year, and $1 million is a big deal to that dude, and he can control the outcome of this game more so than almost anybody. I mean, other than the quarterback, but the quarterback's making $30 million a year, so you can't really buy him.
That's a great idea.
He's an old guy who's been a journeyman, who's bounced around from team to team. There's some precedent. I think the Rams, when they went to the Super Bowl in like 79 or 80, their long snapper went down and they got the coach's long snapper from college and brought him onto the team. Like next thing you know, like one day the guy's working at a Home Depot and the next day he's snapping in the Super Bowl. Yeah. So there's kind of long snapper's one of those jobs where you could do it when you're 40. And it's not really like, it wouldn't work if you said this guy is a wide receiver or a cornerback. You'd go, well, he's 40. It's not going to work. He doesn't have his legs under him anymore. But this, you could be pulled out of retirement. Maybe he gets pulled. I think he gets pulled out of retirement to play, and then the mob shows up.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm remembering there was a story either last year or the year before where there's, I guess, hockey teams, and I never knew this, there's always a backup goalie in the stadium who doesn't dress. Mm-hmm. And 2 years ago, 2 goalies got hurt, and they had to bring this guy out of the stands, and he ended up winning the game. Do you remember that story?
Yes, I remember that story, yeah.
I'm getting a little bit of those vibes from what you're saying. But maybe not kidnapping. Kidnapping the daughter brings an element of, I don't know, that takes it in a direction. I like the idea that maybe they're just going to say, we're going to pay you a lot of money, and you're underappreciated, and here's a chance for you. And he thinks he's going to go down that road. And maybe a little bit of threat, but kidnapping a kid, that's pretty like...
All right, we'll do money. All right, how about this? He's a journeyman guy. He's living in, not great shakes because he's always just kind of been a league minimum guy, like backup outside linebacker, but long snapper, kind of league minimum. Maybe... Scene 1, Act 1, he's being screwed over by the league. They've declined his medical benefits. Yeah, he's out of pocket. The league has screwed him.
And maybe his daughter's medical benefits. Yeah. Like his daughter, right? So his daughter can't fix her teeth.
Right. The system has not taken care of him. He's been out of the league for 2 years. He walks with a little bit of a limp, and the system and the league has not helped him with his daughter, who has medical His daughter's medical very expensive. Yeah. Then gets called because we do that thing the Rams did. His coach from college ends up being the coach of the team that goes to the Super Bowl. The long snapper goes down, and this guy trusts this guy and pulls him out of retirement to show up. Then the mob sees this as an opportunity.
Wait, they get him during a playoff run, or they bring him in early in the season?
I think playoff run.
Yeah,
I think they pull him off in the playoff run.
Yeah.
It's a great feel-good story, but the mob gets the newspaper too.
Yeah.
They realize the guy's made the league minimum. He's living in a crappy house in New Jersey, and his daughter has medical issues and expenses that the league isn't going to pay for. Then they come in, and that's where the story really begins. And by the time we get to the Super Bowl, we don't know whether he's going to make that bad snap or not.
I like it. And I think the mob in this case, because mob, it's harder to kind of the modern mob isn't quite what it used to be, because they're not reading newspapers literally, because there are no newspapers anymore. But who I think would be a good villain or one of these big online gambling sites.
That's right.
I don't want to call them out, but there's one that starts with the words bet and then 3 letters.
Right.
Like if those guys, because these guys are all about analytics and computers, and if they realize that they can make a fuck of a lot of money, if that would be a good villain.
Offshore filthy rich, but it's the offshore on the whatever island chain where they're set up to launder money. This guy's the big bet online or bet whatever that company is. Right. So we get rid of the sort of Italian mobster, the Russian mobster, and we give it the this is why we got to beat this out, Pete Berg.
All right. Well,
that guy's they're the heavy, and they're the ones that are coming with the cash because, again, a bad punt snap and a bad field goal snap, that is good for points.
Yeah. And then at the end, he's got to just say, fuck it, and just deliver the greatest. Like they got to kick a 58-yard field goal in the weather, in a hostile environment, and he's got to just nail that snap, just perfect. Perfect snap.
I think no, that's perfect. That's perfect. But I say we take it a step further.
Okay, where do you want to go?
I say it is raining. And this guy, and we don't know as the audience, is he going to muff this snap or not with a minute and a half left? And these guys are punting in the rain. And we show his hands tied on the ball in the rain on the ball, and we see his POV with the sweat and the rain.
And he's got arthritis a little bit.
He's a little bit older. Yeah, and we do that whole thing. And he skips the ball back to the punter. He goes short. The punter pulls it off the ground, skips it right off his feet, pulls it off, throws the punt. We're ambiguous. We don't know. Did he muff that, or was that just a wet ball in the late game and everything? He hustles down the field.
Makes the tackle.
Drills the guy. The ball comes loose.
Oh, I like it.
Because he's on the defense, right?
You don't see the long snapper cause a fumble-inducing smash hit that leads to a recovery for a touchdown. That would be good.
Or maybe one of the gunners puts the hit on the guy and you see the ball squirt out and now it's slow motion. He's picking it up off the field and taking it in for the touchdown.
Yeah. Well, okay, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. Are you going to play the guy? Do you want to play the kicker?
I can long snap, Pete. No, I'm not going to. That's what I did. That's all I'm good at is long snap.
We were just on a high school football field all weekend doing that commercial, and we were all trying to kick field goals. When's the last time you tried to kick a field goal?
Oh, man. I did a man show bit where I tried out for the Raiders for the Raiders like 25 years ago where I tried. I could never kick.
I kicked a 25-yarder.
Really?
And I felt pretty good. And then I tried to go back to 30, and I lost. Kicking, everybody knows kickers. That's a crazy way to make a living. To kick a 55-yard field goal in an NFL game in an away stadium, those guys, that is hard. Just straight up hard.
I'm with you. And you know what's interesting about those guys? The nerves part of it never really seems to factor in. They make most, they miss some, but even Super Bowl, millions of people, timeout, all eyes, and it doesn't seem to affect them.
Yeah. Well, I think that that kind of mindset, you train yourself to only think about 8 things, whatever it is. Your 2 practice kicks, your 3-step drop, your 2 steps to the side. You're going to take 4 breaths. You're going to swing your arms like free throw shooters. You're going to swing your arms 3 times, and then you're going to think mom,
right,
or your dog's name, or anything you've got, and you hold that routine no matter what, whether it's an extra point, whether it's a field goal attempt when you're up 30 points, or it's a game winner. I think that's the key to being able to survive that kind of pressure. You just got to lock into a routine, and no matter what, you just That's what you do.
Yeah, it's muscle memory and
mind memory though too.
Right.
I think you've got to, because if you start listening to all the other things and the timeouts and the people talking and whatever the defensive line is saying to you and yelling at you and unimaginably horrific insults and weird shit about your pet family, you've got to just lock in. I think it's what I love. I think we all love it. It's just such a lock-in moment.
yeah.
And and if you miss it, man, you're alone.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the beautiful and talented Erica Rhodes, who very frequent guest of the show, beautiful comedian, and I think I brought her up to you at the UFC.
I know I need to meet her. Erica, when are we meeting? I hear we need to meet, and that you're an amazing person.
She is beautiful, and she's very funny, which is not something you always see.
The best combo in the world.
Yeah, and a really funny stand-up, and a really great comedian, and a great cello player, which is very sexy. I don't know why.
So cool.
So sexy.
What an interesting person.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Well, take me let's go watch some stand-up.
Yeah, I'll find out when Erica's next gig is in town, and we'll go watch her do some stand-up. She's a really funny stand-up, and it would be really fun to do. It was funny you brought up earlier. You don't know who has the Ford account, and it made me remember that it may be Daly and Associates. And the reason I bring that up is because in Albert Brooks movies, he's always an executive for advertisers.
Lost in America.
Lost in America, he was, Lost in America, and 2 movies I think he worked. But yeah, Lost in America for sure. That was where he worked. Now, his actual brother Cliff ran Daly and Associates, and they had the Ford account in the movie. And if you recall, there were the guy who's going to do the Ford account, came in from New York, whatever it is. But I think Albert he was pragmatic, and you can tell me as a filmmaker, he's like, I know this business. My brother Cliff runs this business. We can go shoot at his business, and I'll sound like I know what I'm talking about because that's what my brother does, and I know the business. And so he would give himself the job as account manager for Ford or advertising sales guy, just because go for what you know. It's there.
Yeah. Sure. Write what you know, tell stories about what you know. And if you don't know it, learn it and then tell it. I've always been a big, huge proponent of deep research. When I did Lone Survivor, I went to Iraq and lived for a month embedded with the Navy SEAL platoon.
Really?
I lived on an oil rig for deep water. I went back to high school for Friday Night Lights in Texas, Austin Westlake High School, for an entire season. I think the more if you want to have success, I believe in our business, you've got to either do what you know or learn what you don't know so you know it. And in the case of Albert Brooks, for anyone that doesn't know Albert Brooks and hasn't seen Lost in America, he plays an advertising exec, and you can tell he understands the nuance. It's in his blood. And one of the greatest scenes, I believe, in film history is Albert Brooks trying to talk Gary Marshall, the casino owner, into giving him his money back. Right, because his wife woke up in the middle of the night and took their nest egg, all their money, and went crazy on the roulette wheel. And Albert Brooks wakes up and they're broke, and she's like on a binge, and he then has to try and talk to casino, and he's trying to use his advertising speak. The Desert Inn has heart. He's pitching them.
There's a great line when he's pitching Gary Marshall.
Wayne Newton.
Yeah. He goes, I'm not one of these schmucks who rolls into town to watch Wayne Newton. I know what I'm doing.
I like Wayne Newton. Did you say Wayne Newton?
I didn't want to use
I'm a schmuck.
I didn't.
Because I was foolish to use an entertainer as a dividing point.
I know it's It was foolish to use an entertainer as a dividing point.
Right.
I know. Everyone who writes comedy or just writes just had to sit and watch that and go, oh, that's the way you word it.
That's how you do it. But to your point, had he not understood advertising, Albert Brooks, in such a nuanced and deep way, it would have been funny, but it's the pauses and it's like okay, I speak well of some of the advertising folks I work with, but there's another side to these guys because they're desperate salesmen, they're hucksters. They're trying to figure out what you want to hear, and as they're saying it, they're trying to read your reaction. So in mid pitch, they can adjust. Sometimes in mid word, no, they can adjust, and it's a very sales oriented behavior. And Albert Brooks had it, man.
Oh yeah, no that movie. And then, of course, Defending Your Life those are two amazing pieces of work.
He's never not great, in my opinion.
No, he's never not great, but Defending Your Life was an important movie. It wasn't just like a comedy. It was it was important. Like it had a great message to it.
I still think about it. Like, do you have a list secretly of like if you were going to be judged upon death and they were going to play back like 3 of your worst moments ever and 3 of your best moments ever? Do you think about what those are? Do you want to share those with us, Adam?
I will say in the movie, and I'll think about that. In the movie, he really touched on something that it was fear that was crippling, sort of fear that made you act you were at your worst with fear. And I've thought about a lot. Like I would say that I always say most people aren't bad, they're just weak. And, you tell them, look, do this or you're going to lose your job. And they go, okay, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll say whatever you want me to say. I'll act however you want me to act because I fear losing my job. And so it's like most people aren't bad people, they're weak people who like kind of sadly will do whatever for money or whatever, anything not to be shunned. We all sort of saw it during COVID. Like these people weren't all in on masks and vaccines and 6-foot distancing. They just didn't. They were fearful and rightfully so. And they didn't want to be shunned and they certainly didn't want to be removed from their livelihood. So they just did it. So in the movie, he really focuses on fear being the biggest problem. Now, we think about evil or mean or bad or angry, but it's really fear that makes you...
Greed is fear, really.
Right. It makes you do horrible things out of fear. So I think in this experiment that you've put forth, we should really think of like things we've done out of fear in terms of worst moments. I haven't done bad things. I remember just being bad when I was 13 and that kind of stuff, like stuff kid kind of regret, making fun of some. There was a girl in my 6th grade and she was a fat, pasty white girl named Ella. And I would say, Ella, you smella, and you got a Bella like a bowl full of Jella.
Oh,
and I was 12, and I feel stupid that
Why do you take this moment and apologize to Ella right now?
Well, I'm sure Ella took her own life 27 years ago. No, I don't know. Ella, if you're out there, I apologize. I shouldn't have done that. I did a fair amount of that kind of young boy stuff, made fun of my sister, just that stuff. But in general, as an adult, I don't feel like I've done much of that. I've pretty much stood my ground and sort of made decisions that I thought were righteous and didn't really care about the outcome.
You've learned how to control your fear also and identify it and have discipline to not allow fear to put you into a bad spot. because I'm thinking you're right. I totally agree with you. It's fear, and people behave badly because they're scared. However, there's another component which I think is just stupidity, right? And
Yeah.
I think about some of the things I did, and there's a lot of them when I was younger that were just so stupid and so embarrassing. When I was in high school, we had payphones, right? And I went to a boarding school where I lived at the school. And I came up with this genius idea that I was going to rip the payphone off the wall and throw it out the window of the 5-story tower at my school. And then when the payphone broke, I'd run down and get all the money. So I was going to get rich, right? Had this whole idea. So me and my friend, Carlos Salgado, Carlos, yeah, you did this. We ripped the payphone off the wall and we dragged it up to the top of the tower. And we were about to throw it out the window, but then we realized the coins would, just dissipate and go everywhere. So I ran down to my room and I got my laundry bag and I put the phone in the laundry bag because that way we'd catch the coin.
Sure.
We threw it out the window and 5 stories down and it hit the concrete and it literally sounded like a bomb went off. Just this deafening sound. The phone bounced 8 feet in the air, landed again loud, didn't break. Just everybody put their heads out the way and we ran away, right?
Uh-huh.
An hour later, I get a call to go see the principal. I go into his office. There's the phone all banged up on his floor, my laundry bag, and my name tag from the laundry bag that he cut out. And I'm like, and he's like, "You're so stupid." And I'm like, because that wasn't fear. That was just, right. So I do think like there's the idiotic moments that are fear-based, and then there's like, defending your life, some of Albert Brooks' stuff was just stupid.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's the montage of stupidity, and that's done for comedic effect. But
underneath
the message of fear is kind of what is behind so much of your inability to make clear decisions and to act in a way. I mean, if you look back on it historically, when you look at Joan of Arc or whomever, Martin Luther King or something like that, it's always the stories you tell aren't people who are cowardly and got into a fetal position. It's like we admire this thing, right, yet we don't do a good job of cultivating it in the present time, right?
I always felt like, when I look at the success of the UFC and boxing when it works, but particularly the UFC, everybody in that arena is watching the two gentlemen in that octagon who have the ability to manage fear or act in defiance of that fear. And that's the secret sauce is, for anyone that's ever boxed, and you and I both boxed a bit, no matter what, if you and I are going to spar, just fun, and, hey, let's take it easy and just go 3 rounds of sparring. There's a moment that activates in anyone who's going to get into a ring. That's just fear, right?
Right.
And so these fighters engaging in, the closest thing to murderous behavior outside of war that you can get into. And in some ways, I think it's more confrontational than war because you can't do it from 100 yards away with a sniper rifle. You've got to touch and breathe and smell and bleed on each other and function in the presence of such incredible fear. That's why it's such a wildly popular sport.
No, we have a visceral attraction to things that scare us, and you always can't help but put yourself into that position. And, they say, oh, one of the hardest things to do is stand up. You're up there alone with no supporting cast and no teleprompter or whatever. But I do a lot of stand up. So when I see people do stand up, I go, yeah, who cares? It's not a big deal. You know what I mean? Because I could do it. It doesn't scare me. So when I see someone else do it, I don't have the utmost respect and go, I could never do that. But when I see somebody do something that I wouldn't do or couldn't do or be very fearful of doing, then all of a sudden I go, oh man. And the thing about UFC is that is universal.
Yes, yes.
You have, someone who might go, I'd be way too scared if I was tapped to direct a Super Bowl commercial that I would screw it up. I couldn't take that kind of pressure, but not Pete Berg. Pete Berg's fine with that. And then you got Mel Gibson sitting to the left and this guy, Kevin Costner, to the right. And you go, well, these guys, you might be scared to do stuff they do, but they're not scared to do it. But we're all scared to get into the octagon of this. I wouldn't be scared, quite honestly, to do a long snap in the Super Bowl. I would not be scared to do it, but I would be because I can long snap, but I would not get into that octagon. I would be scared of that. And so that's where the respect comes in.
Do you not, like, if you were going to go try out some new material at the Comedy Store or wherever, whatever comedy house you go to, and you're literally in the green room and it's you're up next and they tell you you're on and you're walking on, do you not feel any fear at all anymore at this point in your life? Is there any trace of it?
I don't have any of that, but no, there is no trace, but there are business decisions to be made, which is to say, maybe the person in front of you is about to shoot their special for Netflix. And maybe they've been touring, working on this 20 minutes or whatever the time is for the last year and a half, and they got it down to a razor sharp edge, right?
Yeah.
And they just went out there and just crushed it for 20 minutes with this polished, incredible act that's ready to be filmed the next week. Now I have a hodgepodge of notions and ideas and stuff I wrote down on a buck slip, but not really fully realized. So now I'm backstage. I know this person's wrapping it up because I can hear their act coming up to a crescendo. You can kind of hear when they're wrapping up, like, oh, okay, here comes the big stuff now. And they're getting applause breaks and people are reacting and going nuts. And then all of a sudden I start making business decisions. I'm like, you know what? Instead of
I'm going to go with Old Faithful. You're going to pull up some old tricks.
I'm going to weave. On the drive to the club, I said for the first 10 minutes, I was going to go with some new stuff that I was trying to work out.
Fuck that.
Fuck that. This guy just got done crushing. That audience is going nuts, and I don't want to look like an asshole experimenting up here. So that is kind of a business decision that'll be made, on the fly, but it won't come with the nerves.
And if you're trying new material, I used to date a comedian whose name I won't mention, who I adore, and I used to watch her go up, and I had so much respect for her and how brave she was. And every once in a while, I would watch her just something would just not work, and it was just death, right?
Yes.
Dead silence.
I love it. I love Elaine Boozler as well. Continue.
I'm just. Well, how does that bother you? Does that hurt? Are you such a pro that you can just be like, all right, moving on? Like, what is that? Because that would scare the hell out of me. Like UFC fear.
You have to decide whether it's a good concept that you just screwed up, or it's a bad concept that you thought was a good concept. You know what I mean?
Could it just be a dumbass audience?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. I should have brought that up. There's three possibilities. It's like these guys are tired and they don't get it. Or it's a good idea and you screwed it up. Or maybe it wasn't as good as you thought it was. And you have to be kind of honest with that assessment of whether you're going to do it or not. Pete, I think you and we'll figure out where Erica Rhodes is playing, and we'll go.
I want to meet her.
We'll go have we'll have a drink, and we'll go to a comedy club.
I'd love it.
Would you love it?
I would love it.
American Primeval is the name of the series on Netflix as we speak. Also, we got the Super Bowl, or we have the NFL spots as well. Instagram, should we go to at Pete Berg 44?
Pete Berg 44. Wow, I've never done an Instagram plug. Sure.
And Pete, I'll hit you off the air, and we'll figure it out.
Dude, I'm so happy to reconnect with you. I've known you a long time, since girls jumping on trampolines and dating Kelsey, man. And you're just a great dude.
It's always great to talk to you, buddy. I'm so glad I ran into you as well. And let's hook it up while the iron's hot.
All right, brother.
Great to see you, Pete.
Bye.